72 hours ago, the world's most sophisticated electronic curtain didn't just flicker, it vanished. At exactly 0412 GMT, the radar screens at NATO's Combined Air Operations Center in Uedom, Germany went pitch black. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a power surge. It was a surgical digital lobotomy. For 18 minutes, the eyes of the West were gouged out. And in those 18 minutes, 3 Ukrainian high-value command nodes, fortified positions that survived 2 years of relentless shelling, were erased from the map by hypersonic precision strikes. No warning, no siren, just a sudden violent transition from existence to debris. Welcome to Global Gridlock. I'm Jack Sterling. The Pentagon spent 40 years and trillions of dollars building a glass house. They called it full spectrum dominance. The idea was simple. We see everything, we know everything, and therefore we control everything. But while we were busy admiring the view, Vladimir Putin was figuring out how to smash the glass. What we witnessed 3 days ago wasn't just a tactical victory for Moscow. It was a funeral. It was the formal burial of the American way of war. Right now, in a windowless room deep within the E-ring of the Pentagon, there are men and women who haven't slept in 3 days. They are staring at satellite imagery that shouldn't exist. They are looking at the thermal signatures of Russian Cosmos Inspector satellites that have spent the last 6 months drifting silently like ghosts just kilometers away from our most sensitive Mil-Star communication relays. These aren't just cameras in the sky anymore. They are scalpels. The scramble was frantic. Within seconds of the blackout, the National Reconnaissance Office tried to reposition the Keyhole 11 constellation to get eyes on the impact zones. Nothing. The data streams were spoofed. The satellites were reporting all systems green, while the ground stations were receiving static. That is the nightmare scenario. It's one thing to have your bird shot down. It's another thing entirely to have your bird lie to your face while the enemy is moving in the shadows. Why is the Pentagon terrified? Because they realize far too late that the backdoor war isn't coming. It's already been won. For 3 decades, the United States has operated under a comfortable delusion that Russian technology was a rusted relic of the Cold War, held together by duct tape and Soviet-era vacuum tubes. We laughed at their carrier smoke and mocked their tank turrets. But while we were perfecting stealth fighters that cost $250 million apiece, the Kremlin was investing in the asymmetric kill chain. They didn't need to build a better jet, they just needed to make sure our jet couldn't talk to its pilot, its base, or its missiles. This is the collapse of the 30-year military order. Since the first Gulf War, the global hierarchy was built on the information edge. If you had the best GPS, the best real-time data, and the best satellite uplink, you were God. You could fight a war with a laptop from an air-conditioned trailer in Nevada. That era ended 72 hours ago. Putin has turned the high ground of space into a back alley. By leveraging a network of commercial, dual-use satellites and deep space electronic warfare platforms, Russia has created a blind spot the size of Eastern Europe. They are using our own reliance on the cloud against us. Every time a U.S. commander checks a real-time battlefield map, they are now forced to ask the one question that ends empires. Is this real? If the GPS coordinates are off by just 50 meters, the JDAM misses. If the encrypted link lags by 3 seconds, the drone is intercepted. If the satellite imagery is delayed by 10 minutes, the battalion is walking into a meat grinder. The U.S. military is a high-performance Ferrari, but Putin has just poured sugar in the gas tank and painted over the windshield. This isn't a regional skirmish in the Donbass. This isn't about borders or ethnic enclaves. This is a global systemic reset. If the U.S. cannot guarantee the security of its space architecture, the entire NATO alliance becomes a paper tiger. Poland, the Baltics, the Pacific, every security guarantee we've signed since 1945 is backed by the promise of American technological supremacy. If that supremacy is a myth, the dollar is just paper, and our carriers are just floating targets. The intelligence failure here isn't just about a few hacked satellites. It's a failure of imagination. We assumed the Russians would play by the rules of the 20th century. We assumed they would try to match us plane for plane, ship for ship. Instead, they went for the jugular. They went for the data. As we sit here, more Inspector satellites are maneuvering in geosynchronous orbit. They are nesting. They are waiting. And the terrifying truth that the White House is trying to suppress is that we have no way to move them. We are currently hostage to a power that has decided that if they can't see the world their way, no one gets to see it at all. The gridlock isn't on the ground. It's in the stars. And the lights are going out one by one. We've spent 30 years worshiping at the altar of the invisibles. The F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Lightning, the B-21 Raider. These aren't just planes. They are trillion-dollar bets that the laws of physics can be bribed. We told our pilots that if their radar cross-section was the size of a marble, they were ghosts. We told them they were invincible. We lied. Because while we were refining the composite curves of a wingtip, the engineers at Almaz Antey were rewriting the math of the hunt. They weren't trying to see the marble. They were looking for the ripple the marble makes in the pond. Enter the S-500 Prometheus. This isn't just a missile system. It's a multispectral computational predator designed to do one thing: make the invisible bleed. To understand why the Pentagon is currently in a state of quiet, dignified panic, you have to understand the frequency war. Stealth is a specialized trick. It's designed to defeat X-band fire control radars, the high-frequency, short-wavelength beams that missiles use to find their final kill track. You shape the plane, you hide the heat, and the X-band bounces off at an angle, leaving the radar screen empty. But physics is a cruel mistress. The S-500 doesn't just use one eye. It uses a tiered architecture of frequencies that talk to each other in real time. It starts with the 91N6A acquisition radar, Big Bird's meaner digital brother. It operates in the S-band. Then you have the 76T6 and 77T6 multi-mode engagement radars. These things are pushing L-band and X-band pulses simultaneously. Here is the engineering war in a nutshell. A stealth aircraft might be a ghost to X-band, but to a long wavelength L-band radar, that $150 million fighter is a giant metallic disturbance in the force. The L-band finds the general box where the plane is hiding. It whispers to the S-band. The S-band narrows the search. Then, the S-500's processors, custom-built hardened silicon that ignores our traditional jamming, run a series of non-cooperative target recognition algorithms. They aren't looking for a radar return anymore. They are looking for the void. Knows what's that? They are looking for the hole in the background radiation of the sky. Mathematically, the S-500 doesn't need to see the F-35. It just needs to calculate the exact coordinates of the space where the F-35 is supposed to be and isn't. It's a negative space hunt. And once that math checks out, the Prometheus doesn't just fire, it executes. And then comes the kinetic reality. The steel in the sky? When the S-500 launches, it isn't sending a standard surface-to-air missile. It's launching the 77N6N and the 7N6N1 interceptors. These are not weapons. They are hypersonic sledgehammers. We're talking about Mach 9, 9 times the speed of sound. At that velocity, the air in front of the missile turns into white-hot plasma. The 77N6 doesn't even need an explosive warhead for most targets. The sheer kinetic energy of a direct hit at those speeds is equivalent to a tactical nuclear strike without the fallout. It hits with the force of a freight train condensed into the size of a spearhead. These interceptors reach altitudes of 200 kilometers. They are operating in the near-space vacuum where our current countermeasures, the flares, the chaff, the digital tow decoys, are effectively useless. You can't pop flares in a vacuum and expect them to confuse a seeker that is tracking your airframe's molecular friction. There is no American countermeasure for the 77N6 because we never thought we'd be the ones being hunted in the stratosphere. We built the Aegis and the Thaade to hit dumb ballistic missiles following predictable arcs. The S-500's interceptors are smart. They have active grid fin control and cold gas thrusters for terminal maneuvering. They don't just fly, they hunt. Now, I want you to put yourself in the cockpit of an F-22 over the Black Sea. You're at 60,000 feet. You feel like a god. You're in supercruise, gliding through the thin air without even engaging your afterburners. Your cockpit is a masterpiece of ergonomics. The glass displays are showing you a clean sky. You are the apex predator. Your stealth indicator is green. You are a ghost. And then the tone starts. It's not the frantic, high-pitched chirp of an old-school radar lock. The S-500 is more sophisticated than that. It's a low intermittent pulse. Your electronic warfare suite is trying to categorize the threat, but the library is empty. The signal is hopping across 1,000 frequencies a second. It's LPI, low probability of intercept, but you are intercepting it. The realization hits you like a bucket of ice water. If you can hear them, they can see you. You bank hard, pulling 9 Gs, trying to put a terrain feature between you and the source. But there is no terrain at 60,000 feet. You're naked. You look at your fuel state, you look at your weapon bays. You realize that every advantage you were sold in flight school, the radar absorbent material, the internal weapon carriage, the low observable nozzles, is now just dead weight. The tone goes solid, a continuous haunting hum that vibrates in your teeth. That hum is the sound of the 77N6N1 waking up. It has just cleared the atmosphere. It's 500 miles away, but at Mach 9, it will be in your cockpit in less than 3 minutes. You pop your internal jammers, flooding the sky with digital noise. You wait for the brake lock signal. It never comes. The S-500's L-band array is burning through your jamming like a searchlight through fog. The computer on the ground isn't being fooled by your fake echoes. It's simply averaging the noise and hitting the center of the bloom. In that moment, the silence in the cockpit is deafening. You realize the engineering war was over before you even took off. The trillion-dollar shield has shattered. You aren't a ghost. You're just a man in a very expensive, very fast metal coffin, waiting for a hypersonic kinetic slug to turn you into a memory. This is why the Pentagon is terrified. It's not that the S-500 is a better missile. It's that the S-500 has proven that the fundamental assumption of Western air power, stealth, is a lie. We are entering the era of post-stealth warfare. An era where if you can be calculated, you can be killed. And Putin's engineers have the calculators. But wars aren't just won with physics and fire. They are won with ledgers. They are won in the cold, unfeeling columns of a spreadsheet. And right now, the United States is staring at a mathematical abyss. Welcome to the economic execution. This is where the backdoor war stops being a tactical headache and starts being a terminal illness for the American empire. Let's talk about the math of attrition. In the Pentagon, they like to use the term force multiplication. In the real world, we call it the burn rate. An F-35A Lightning II, fresh off the Lockheed Martin assembly line, carries a price tag of approximately $82.5 million. That's for the airframe alone. If you want the pilot trained to fly it, the specialized maintenance suite to keep its stealth coating from peeling, and the logistics tail to support it, you're looking at a $200 million asset per tail number. Now let's look at the other side of the ledger. A single S-500 interceptor costs roughly $2 million to $5 million to produce at scale. Do the math. For the price of one F-35, Vladimir Putin can launch 40 interceptors. Even if the S-500 has a dismal probability of kill of only 25%, which it doesn't, the math still dictates that the United States loses. This is the economic inversion. It is a state of warfare where the defender spends significantly less to destroy an asset than the aggressor spent to build it. We are currently spending $80 million to lose, while the adversary is spending $5 million to win. In a war of attrition, that isn't a challenge, it's a mathematical certainty of defeat. You cannot outproduce a 16-to-1 loss ratio, no matter how much currency you print. And that brings us to the industrial bottleneck. If an F-35 is shot down over the Black Sea today, how long does it take to replace it? The current lead time for a new 5th-generation airframe is 18 to 24 months. That's assuming the global supply chain for specialized semiconductors and rare earth magnets isn't compromised, which, by the way, it is. We build exquisite platforms. We build Ferraris in a world that needs T-34 tanks. But the airframe isn't the real bottleneck. It's the meat in the seat. It takes 3 years and roughly $11 million to train a single 5th-generation fighter pilot to combat-ready status. That is a human asset that cannot be surged. You can't 3D print a pilot with 1,500 hours of flight time and the instinct to survive a Mach 9 intercept. When a pilot goes down, that knowledge, that investment, and that capability are erased instantly. Compare that to the Russian or Iranian defense model. They aren't trying to build the perfect invisibles. They are building good enough systems at a renewable rate. They have moved to a war footing where their production lines for missiles are running 24/7, decentralized and hardened against airstrikes. They are treating missiles like bullets, disposable, cheap, and infinite. We are treating our planes like crown jewels, irreplaceable, fragile, and few. The U.S. Air Force is currently facing a pilot shortage of nearly 2,000 personnel. We are already redlining. If this backdoor war scales up and we start losing 2 or 3 jets a week to S-500 batteries, the U.S. tactical air power will cease to exist as a global force within 6 months. Not because we ran out of courage, but because we ran out of exquisite assets. Then it will settle, basically nature's wow. Now let's zoom out. Look at the global market ripple. The world isn't watching this in a vacuum. The markets are watching. Every time a Russian satellite darkens a NATO screen or a Prometheus battery locks onto a Western jet, the risk premium on global trade spikes. Look at the Persian Gulf. Insurance premiums for oil tankers are currently tethered to the perceived invincibility of the U.S. Navy. The moment that invincibility is questioned, the moment the world sees that a $5 million land-based battery can gridlock a $1 trillion strike group, those premiums don't just go up, they explode. When it becomes too expensive to insure a barrel of Brent crude, the price at the pump in Chicago or London doesn't care about stealth technology. It cares about supply. We are looking at a projected oil spike of 40% in the event of a sustained electronic warfare blockade in the Middle East. But the real execution is the dollar. Since 1944, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency for one primary reason. It was backed by the undisputed kinetic power of the US military. If you traded in dollars, you were under the protection of the global grid. You were safe. If that grid can be flicked off like a light switch by a backdoor war, the fundamental value proposition of the dollar evaporates. Why hold greenbacks if the power they represent can't protect a cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz? We are seeing the de-dollarization of the global defense market in real time. Countries like India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia are looking at the S-500 and the Shadow constellation, and they are realizing that the American security umbrella has holes in it. They are starting to hedge. They are shifting to multi-currency settlements. They are buying Russian and Chinese systems not just because they are cheaper, but because they work in an environment where American tech is being systematically blinded. When the cost of maintaining the empire exceeds the profit of the empire collapses. It's a law of history as old as Rome. And the S-500 is the ultimate debt collector. The board has been set. The pieces have moved. And as of 06 this morning, the map of the world looks nothing like the one you studied in school. 72 hours after the lights went out at NATO's Air Operations Center, the backdoor war has metastasized into a global paralysis. In Brussels, the emergency session of the North Atlantic Council didn't end with a declaration of strength. It ended in a whisper. For the first time since 1949, Article 5 has been invoked not against a visible invasion, but against an invisible wall. The Pentagon is calling it the Prometheus exclusion. As we speak, Russia has activated a contiguous chain of S-500 and S-400 batteries stretching from Kaliningrad to Sevastopol and down through their permanent bases in Syria. They've exported the backdoor logic to Tehran. The result? A 600-kilometer no-fly zone now blankets the most volatile corridors of the Middle East. It's a kinetic dome that doesn't just stop missiles, it stops American influence. Look at Israel. For decades, the Israeli Air Force operated on the red line principle. If a threat emerges in Lebanon, Syria, or Iraq, the IAF erases it with impunity. That era ended yesterday. With S-500 batteries now integrated into the regional Shadow constellation, the IAF's F-35s are no longer ghosts, they are targets. Jerusalem is realizing that their qualitative military edge has been blunted by a Russian-made digital ceiling. The red lines haven't just been crossed, they've been erased. But the real earthquake is happening in the Pacific. In Beijing, they aren't just watching, they are calculating. China has seen the S-500 dismantle the myth of U.S. stealth in a matter of days. They see the industrial bottleneck, the reality that the U.S. cannot replace what it loses. The People's Liberation Army has just shifted its posture. They've seen that the full spectrum dominance of the U.S. Navy is tethered to a satellite architecture that is currently being spoofed, blinded, and held hostage. The first island chain is no longer a barrier. It's a target-rich environment where the hunter has become the hunted. If the U.S. cannot guarantee the high ground of space, they cannot hold the Pacific. Period. The new map of the world is a map of hard zones. The days of the U.S. global policeman flying anywhere, anytime are over. We are retreating into a world of fractured bubbles. If you are inside the Prometheus dome, you are in a different reality, one where American carrier groups are just slow-moving targets, and stealth is a word from a bygone era. The intelligence scramble wasn't a one-off failure. It was the Pearl Harbor of the information age. The difference is, this time, we don't have the industrial base to build a new fleet in 3 years. We don't have the engineering war won. And we definitely don't have the economic execution in our favor. We are witnessing the great gridlock. Philosophically, we have reached the end of the uncontested century. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the West operated under the assumption that technology would always be our shield. We believe that math was our ally, but math is objective. Math doesn't care about ideologies or global orders. And the math has shifted to the East. The era of American uncontested skies is dead. It died in the 18 minutes of silence over Germany. It died in the hypersonic arc of a 77N6 interceptor. It died in the cold realization that our trillion-dollar bets have been hedged out of existence. The world is no longer a global village. It's a series of dark rooms, and we just lost the flashlight. This is the reality the mainstream media won't tell you. They'll talk about tensions and diplomacy. They won't tell you that the very foundation of Western power, the ability to see and strike with impunity, has been surgically removed. The gridlock is here. The world has changed. Subscribe to Global Gridlock to stay ahead of the curve.